Mr. Chairman, questions? Are we allowed to interrupt or you want us to wait?
We've been asking questions in the flow of things, and I think that's worked well to date. So if you do have any questions before, during, or after, please feel free to answer them at your convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are here tonight to talk about the overall general fund budget. Basically, we are looking at service provision through uncertainty. So we have a number of questions that we still have to answer. We are looking forward to adopting a budget, realizing that there is some unavailable information. And as that unavailable information at the moment does come forward, we will be back in front of council. So this does not mean what you may or may not approve tonight is absolutely final. We can absolutely make changes as we go and as we get different levels of funding or new information on different levels of restrictions through COVID and different things of that nature. So overall, the main budget points to speak of is the budget is balanced as of right now through no tax rate increase as council wanted. 2.18% assessment increase overall to our assessment base, 1.44% related to new construction and 0.74% related to market assessment increases. Just a reminder there that there were adjustments made to the commercial sector due to the COVID-19 impacts. The city is maintaining fiscal responsibility in a year of uncertainty. We've had to deal with factors above inflation and revenue losses due to COVID-19, and we're continuing to offer fair wages to our staff to keep pace with inflation in that area. Costs above inflation to note, our tipping fees have increased substantially, not only due to new construction and additional homes, but due to the actual rate being charged. We are anticipating, we still don't have final numbers on insurance, but we're anticipating some large increases there. That is a market trend that's been happening across municipalities. Audit fees also rise based on the contract that we have, and that is faster than inflation. We've seen an increase, obviously, to the number of cleaning supplies that we've been required to purchase due to COVID-19 protocol and making sure that our facilities are safe. And there's additional security costs associated with some of the screening requirements, making sure that the people in the buildings are keeping physical distance and different things like that. Other costs and service improvements that we've managed to make during a little bit of a crazy year, partially due to our reaction to COVID-19, is the phone rationalization. So we have moved from a lot of landlines to more cellular phones, and that has actually saved us money. Working through building rationalization and optimization, so moving all of our tourism and recreation folks into one building has resulted in some rental savings. And we've been working diligently with our staff to create capacity and find better ways to schedule our employees so that we're getting the work done that's necessary in the time frame that we need it done. Some of the new costs that have been incorporated into the budget, licensing costs for new software. So there's a lot of great things that software can do, but they do come at a cost. Some of the examples there for the new licensing fees are Engage Fredericton. Coming soon, the mass notification app that will help in a number of different areas that we'll speak to through the budget. Recommending a new procurement software. So there's a number of software items there that will have ongoing annual costs. Bocce ball maintenance is a new service, I guess, that we're offering. So there are additional costs with maintaining that facility. The new all-wheeled sports plaza out back will have additional maintenance costs for just keeping that clean. And there's additional special projects funding that we've added to support First Nations relations, including research and policy development and different things there. So just a reminder for our tax base growth over the years. So we are somewhat lower than we had been early in the 2000s, but we are holding our own and we are maintaining some positive growth there. Overall, as a city, since 2012, we have saved $9.9 million. That relates to 12 to 13 cents on the tax rate that we've saved as a city and not passed on those additional expenses to our residents. For 2021, the adjustments that we have made, while they're somewhat more modest than some of the other years, we have been working diligently to find some savings. We do have energy efficiency savings that we've realized through our facilities, continuing some of the energy efficiency projects. Again, the phone rationalization, which has resulted in lower costs for our phones. The building rental savings is mentioned by housing people under one roof, as well as, this is confusing to some people, so I'll clarify this one, some contract services for cell monitoring at the police station. That is not cell phone monitoring, that is the prisoner cell monitoring. We used to contract out to commissionaires, but we've actually got an agreement with the sheriffs at the courthouse who help us in that area. So overall, I'll quickly go through the summary of revenue changes. So no major changes from when the revenue was presented to council. Total revenue there of just over $125 million, which represents a 0.54% increase over prior year. The proposed rate increases again, Royals Field costs per game going up per the 3-year rate strategy there. And the Frederick Square Garage, East End Garage, York parking lot, and Officer Square parking lot are increasing in line with the 5-year rate strategy that's implemented through the parking lots. A quick highlight of the non-tax revenue adjustments. So for parking revenue for 2021, due to demand in our parking services, we're anticipating a loss in revenue there of $705,000. Recreational facilities, we're anticipating a loss there of $686,000. Transit revenue is anticipated to go down by almost $600,000. We do have some positive revenue though for 2021. Dispatch services of approximately $278,000 due to newly negotiated agreements. Our building and plumbing permits are increasing based on the high construction that we've seen in 2020, and we're anticipating to continue into 2021. Fire services to LSDs, that is based on the assessment values of those local services districts that we provide the services to. Maintenance of designated routes, that is the formula that's used and the rates provided by the provincial department. And credit card cash back, so making sure that we're managing our cash balances and finding ways to use our credit cards a little bit more to earn some cash. So jumping in, this is all new content from here on in as far as service-based budgets. That is the breakdown of the services that the city provides into the larger buckets or program areas. So we'll start off with governance and civic engagement. So within governance and civic engagement, we do have those 3 services there: community leadership, intergovernmental affairs, and management systems, for a total budget of approximately $5.2 million. Some of the main areas of focus for 2020 and going into 2021 are savings in committee supplies, and that's a reduction due to the virtual meetings that we are having. We have enhancements to corporate metrics and KPIs that we want to focus on and really make sure that we have a strong dashboard to identify where we're at. Review of grants, applications, and the impact on the community. So I think we had a fairly robust discussion there to make sure that we're getting the best grant applications that we can, and that we're monitoring the impact on the community. Within First Nations relations and special projects, excuse me. We want to develop a closer working relationship with the New Brunswick 6 Wolastoqey Nations. We want to develop practices for consultation and engagement with our First Nations. And we want to cooperate with other departments to pursue implementation of the park plans going forward. Within intergovernmental affairs, we want to identify and pursue third-party funding to implement the city's programs and priorities, advance the city's interests in our provincial legislation and policy changes. And we want to continue to engage in dialogue with City Council so that we're clearly able to articulate Council's priorities so that they can be communicated to other levels of government as well. Any questions on those areas? Okay. Within economic vitality services, we have business attraction and retention, development approval, land use planning, tourism and events development, and tourism marketing and sales, for a total bucket there of just under $6.7 million. Within development approval and land use planning, some of the things they want to focus on next year would be completion of zoning bylaw amendments to conform with the new municipal plan, to receive the single room occupancy proposed amendments and bring those forward through the bylaw amendment process. We want to facilitate the preparation of a housing needs assessment and affordable housing strategy for the city of Fredericton. And we want to initiate a new municipal plan for the South Core. Within tourism marketing and sales, this year has been a very different year for that group. Some of the major initiatives that they've undertook to help support Fred Local and support our local businesses, to promote our Atlantic bubble and sustain the tourism sector through this crisis. The major Dinners on Us campaign, where we've worked with hotels and local businesses to make sure that people are staying locally. We want a post-COVID-19 recovery that will restore the tourism, both from inside and outside the Atlantic bubble as allowed. The tourism accommodation levy. So we want to engage our partners and stakeholders on marketing and development initiatives that will help promote our area. The tourism accommodation levy is an opportunity to reach new markets that we might not have been able to before. The new Market Basket initiative, which is a website that drives online sales for market vendors and positions Fredericton as a premier market destination, has been just newly implemented. We want to continue to leverage our micro beverage industry through Fredericton's Tap Room Trail, and the ongoing literature and storage distribution and efficiency project that they're working on to improve the marketing of the city, as well as save staff time in that distribution. Within tourism development and operations, continued support of the Garrison Master Plan implementation. 2021 will see the return of the Garrison Night Market with a different look and feel to maintain the orders that are in place for COVID-19. Preparing for the future, a program review of all tourism programming. The return of sport tourism operations and special events. Planning for next phases of Frostival development post-COVID. One of successful transfers, I guess, was our Adventures program. We've transferred that over to MBCCD to maintain the operations of that. And the division, I guess, of tourism has what they call Fredericton Tourism Idea Work. So they've been working over the past few years on cultivating ideas from their staff and monitoring the implementation of some of those improvements that they're making. Within environmental steward,
Councillor Rogers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Alicia. I just wanted to clarify. I think this is what it means, but just for anyone who's watching, I'd like to clarify. So when we say preparing for the future program review of tourism programming, are we really talking about the programming that we support in our downtown, sort of in the Garrison district? In officers, I mean, maybe it won't be Officer Square, but some of the other things like concerts or whatever, is that what that is referring to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be part of it, absolutely. But I think it is a larger everything that tourism touches.
Okay.
All of the ways that they promote the city, including that daily programming that they do in our downtown core. Just kind of doing an overhaul and really looking at what we do to promote the city.
Okay, That's great. Thank you. I just know that some of that programming was greatly missed. So I just wanted to clarify it was being considered for this year. Thank you.
Within environmental stewardship services, composting, environmental outreach, solid waste management, and stormwater management for a total bucket there of programming for just under $4.5 million. In environmental outreach, the intention is to publish detailed environmental data on an open data portal to provide information for open source funding, not funding, sorry, Adam's probably better at talking about that. Implementation of our corporate energy management plan and integration with our overall asset management plan. Coordination and tracking the implementation of the climate change adaptation plan, as well as partnerships with CCNB and GFSI on community outreach and looking at ways that we could look at funding and actions to help promote residential and low-income efficiency projects. Within stormwater management, continuing to look at increasing our resiliency to flooding to help protect homes, businesses, and our transportation networks. Solid waste management, using a web-based tool called Recycle Coach, and that does some recycling promotion and additional information there. Improving our recycling depot sites and search for a second south side location, and monitoring the extended producer responsibility program for paper packaging. Within composting, they're working on a review on biosolids, which could increase the production of our composting material and also improve the material. What that could do is allow for increased usage on all of our city projects. And roadway operations is currently sorting materials for incorporation into our topsoil production. So that.
Councilor McDermott.
My apologies. I didn't mean to interrupt like mid-sentence. I just wanted to get my hand up there. I'll wait until the end of the environmental stewardship part.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Councilor McDermott.
Well, now that that's clear, do we do anything in terms of, from an environmental stewardship in that bucket, education, environmental education with residents as well as businesses? I mean, I know we've had programs in the past around like Green Matters and efficiency. We used to operate some programming around composting and what that can mean. I've become increasingly aware that there are a lot of residents out there and businesses who aren't aware of some of the, I guess, some of the sensitive ecosystems that we occupy, that we live in. Our riparian zone, in terms of that area between the river and the land, where the city has taken upon themselves to acquire land, and there's a very good reason for that. But I think there are a lot of property owners who actually treat it as their property and no one else's business, and they do damage to it. Same thing can be said for, look, I learned this summer about the butternut tree. It's an endangered species. We have it in public land. We have it in private land. It's not something that gets shared. So is there anything that we do in terms of that outside of the, albeit right now, minimal work that we do in, say, Odell Park from an interpretive point of view? And is that on the radar?
That's an excellent question, Mr. Chair, and I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Sorry, I can speak to that, Mr. Chair. It's Michael Baldwin.
Go ahead, Michael.
I think it's a good question from the councillor. As we review the environmental program, as you know, we've made a change. We've brought that into the corporate service department. So it's playing both an internal and external role in terms of how we not only monitor what we do, but track and tell the story. The open data portal is going to be one way to track and be able to share publicly environmental metrics. So how our performance is, and that can speak to, I think, some of the items that the councillor mentioned around riparian zones, some of those aspects that come through land use planning and our protection strategies. In terms of how we're engaging, I know the councillor referenced a couple programs, Green Matters and Green Shops. I think the approach going forward is to look where we can leverage, whether it be funding and expertise, to partner more with those groups in the community to help deliver either some of that programming or or education. And Brittany McLean, our environmental coordinator, gave a presentation of public safety last week and spoke about a couple of funding strategies that she is working on to do just that, which is to leverage some funding streams to partner with some of the organizations in our community so we can get, more engage them so the reach is further. So with that, Mr. Chair, I hope that answers or adds some insight into for the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate the background on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Michael. I now have questions from Kevin Dara and Stephen Chase. Following.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably a question for Mike Baldwin. Just out of curiosity's sake, the conversation about composting and recycling. I'll start with the recycling piece. One thing that John had said that just kind of popped into my mind. I didn't know, like I'm a pretty avid recycler at home. I put out 3 bins a week kind of thing, 2 to 3 bins a week. But what I didn't know is that, for instance, pizza boxes, which are cardboard, are not actually recyclable because they've got a grease stain on them. And if it goes into the recycling and another product touches it and gets transferred from that pizza box, that's no good as well. So the education piece on recycling, I think, does need to be stepped up. Obviously, it can't happen this year, but maybe in the next budgets for next year when we're talking about education. When we talk about composting, there's been a lot of people that I've talked to recently that are wanting or feel the city should move towards composting of home waste products, food waste products. And I've pushed the fact that, backyard composting is the way to go. It's less expensive for the city and it's something that can be done. But a lot of people don't have the education on how to use and how to work with backyard composting. So I'm wondering if the city's going to continue to push that, or are they going to move into developing a facility for composting for food waste? And then whatever the answer is, how are they going to proceed with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess my answer, I think Sean Lee can certainly and should speak to the aspect around recycling and a relationship there with the Solid Waste Commission. In terms of composting and education, I think that's something, we used to do that in the past. And I think, it's something that I know we've had a conversation over the last year or two about how to go about doing that. We partnered at one point with the folks at Greener Village and offering some training there and promoting, backyard composting. So that's something that we can certainly take under review about it. Is there an opportunity there? But as it relates to the recycling and education, that I'll defer to Sean on that. He over to Sean.
Sean, your mic's off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess on the solid waste side and the composting side for the landfill, we are part of the Fredericton Solid Waste area collection. So we do take most of our materials there, both our recycling and our regular waste. We've looked at it from several different perspectives. Right now, the Fredericton Solid Waste group does have a methane recovery. So any of the compostable materials that go to the landfill actually break down and there's a methane gas created, and we do recover that, and that powers a number of homes in the local area because they put it back onto the grid for NB Power. If we were to jump in and do a separate collection, that would be solely on the city of Fredericton. So essentially we'd have to have our own collection, our own facility where we're collecting compost, and then we'd have to manage it and run it ourselves. So I think we looked at it and didn't find value in that. And I think we did a report several years ago that kind of highlighted that. And the most effective kind of the system that provides the best value from to the user and reduces greenhouse gas emissions is actually the methane recovery system that's currently in place.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor, anything further?
I'll chew on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Chase, you're next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A couple of things, a comment and a question. I'm really pleased to see the improving the recycling depot sites and search for another south side location. This has been a frequent ask of residents all over the city, but in particular on the Hill. So, this is an extremely important initiative, and I commend staff for that. I do have a question, though, further on the recycling is I'm a bit surprised not to see reference to our dealing with plastic recycling, in particular plastic bags. It's come up at our table before as to what we might do or not do. Some municipalities in New Brunswick have adopted policy, and encourage merchants in plastic bags to reduce that use of that product. I am aware that the federal government is intending to bring something in 2021. But I just wonder why, when cities like Moncton have adopted, Moncton Riverview, Dieppe have adopted measures, and I think some other communities, I really think it behooves Fredericton to, step up its game on, reduction, working with the commercial merchant community to reduce the use of single-use plastics. And so I would turn to staff for a comment on that as to how we could do that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is something that we can certainly look into. To what degree we've done work on it to date, I'm not 100% clear. And I guess if tonight is a signal from council that is a direction they want to go, we can certainly come back to the Public Safety and Environment Committee or the Environment Committee and have a conversation around that. And as Councillor Chase does point out, there are other communities, some close by, that have gone that direction. So that is something that we can explore further, much like we've done with some of the events around how do we deal with some of our recycling. It's an iterative approach in terms of how we deal with those things. So I think we can certainly, with council's blessing, if that's a choice, we can explore that further in the new year.
Thanks, Mike. I really do look forward to that because the interest is high in the community, and I think it's the leadership that we could provide in this domain. I mean, we're not breaking new ground here. There's all kinds of models to look at. So, Mike, I would look forward to seeing something brought forward to public safety, to the Environmental Stewardship Committee, newly badged, sometime very early in the new year. Thank you. Hope I got that name right, City Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rogers, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Leisha, I don't know if you want to answer this or put this to someone else. It's about the partnership with CCMB and GFSI on the community outreach and residential low-income efficiency funding and actions. And so I'm curious about that. I don't sit in public safety and environment, and I'm not aware of that program, and it's interesting. So I'm wondering if someone could share with us what that is.
I would defer to Michael Baldwin.
Okay. You're busy tonight, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Councillor Rogers. I do believe that is, I think Adam can explain that a bit further. And if you could go back on the slide, Alicia, and I can have a look at that. Well, maybe it's a long ways back, sorry.
Yeah, it's right there, yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair, right. We are looking at different partnership, with the community college and obviously with GFSI on what are the outreach potentials. And it goes back when I made the comment that we're trying to work with those community groups that really are the touch point for, for the community. And obviously in this case, we're partnering on the education side. but where GFSI is working with the community, they're in the community, looking at various opportunities for funding for them in terms of, are there opportunities to put some efficiency products or efficiency training into low income houses. And in terms of further detail on that, Brittany can certainly come forward and explain that. But it is one of our ways when I was answering Councillor McDermott is to how do we partner with folks that are in the community? And in this case, there is that ongoing discussion, and Councillor Rogers, you're the chair on the with regard to our Housing First. And with this are there different ways we can partner to get some funding in to bring some efficiency pieces to those, when we find low-income housing solutions in residents where we can offer perhaps some funding to help that out. It's early days, but it's exploration we want to follow through. And again, under the theme of partnership, work with those in the community that are having an impact, and if we can facilitate, we'll do that. That one has an environmental bent. Can we bring that into that space?
Would we imagine that some of that funding could potentially come through federal programming? Are we seeing ourselves as a facilitator of the partnerships? Is that the idea?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly it. And Brittany, when she gave a presentation at Public Safety the other day, she talked about, electric charging stations, perhaps in the development community. And what we're trying to do there is exactly that, be a facilitator. As back in the day when we had Green Matters and Green Shops, it was labor intensive in the fact that we actually had, employees here at the city, whether contract or full-time, delivering those programs. And what we found, perhaps a better way was to leverage those in the community doing really real work. So if we have an opportunity to seek out, whether it be through Natural Resource Canada or another funding body where we can, play the role of developing the right contractual relationship and making sure that, much like we do with the grant program, now community grants, is there a way that we could follow that program in a similar way that we could offer some environmental funding to community groups where they're on the ground and they can have an impact?
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Seeing no further questions, Alicia, could we continue on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on with livable community services, a larger bucket of services in this area: arboriculture, community liaison, social outreach, community special event coordination and support, cultural development, heritage planning and conservation, horticulture, leisure and recreation development and delivery, parks and playground management, recreation facility scheduling, and sports field management, for a total cost of $14.3 million.
Councillor Millay and
Mr.
Councillor
Chair.
Rogers follow.
Just wondering, recreation facility scheduling, what falls under that line item?
So that would include the actual scheduling of the facilities, but it also includes a large portion of the arena operation, so actual building operations. So that's why it does look like a rather large number. It's people and facilities.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Rogers, followed by Councillor Chase, then Councillor McGarry.
So that was my question too. And I would suggest, and I don't think it's intentional at all, but that's a really deceiving way I don't think you were being deceptive, but that does not, to me, that's just operation. That's facility management. And I think it's better to call it that, because it makes sense that it would cost that much to run those facilities, to operate those facilities. I find that really confusing, and I think anybody looking at it would too, and it's a totally legitimate expense. So I would suggest changing the wording on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Excuse me, Councillor Chase, then McGarry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, park plan implementation. If that's a heading, it's very broad, and there are a number of park plans that are on the shelf right now. Starting with Odell Park and Killarney Park, Wilmot Park, Carlton Park, for 4. And I'd be curious to know, they're not named here. So could someone give us an explanation of which parks would be planned for implementation in 2021? Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is the service-based budget. So these would be the operational costs associated with all of our parks and playgrounds. This wouldn't be the capital discussion where we would talk about what parks are being completed. So we did have the capital discussion, but we can definitely get you additional information as far as what capital projects are being planned for next year.
Well, I am interested in particular, and, you know, pardon me if I didn't raise this under the right budget heading, but the redevelopment or improvement, you know, to these parks, extremely high public interest in Odell and Clarny Parks for two. And I think the public is anxious to see, you know, movement made in, you know, it was accompanied by all kinds of fanfare, you know, in public consultation, I was trying to get the right word, communication, conversation, I'm sorry, it was public conversation. So yeah, look, I am very keen along with the public to see, you know, get some clarity as to what's going to happen in 2021 in these parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Councillor McGarity.
Yeah, just the cost regarding cleaning the fields after sports groups. I guess there's been a bee in my bonnet for a while. It's maybe we should be more upfront. We shouldn't be cleaning up after groups, and this might have to go parks and trees, is that if there are groups that are not cleaning up after themselves after these facilities, then they should be warned the second time. They should be, the privilege is taken away. So, I mean, when money's tight like that, we can't have our parks and trees people take away from their other maintenance duties to clean up bottles and paper and glass and whatever else. So that's what I like to see. If you don't mind, there was one question earlier I had on insurance and audit costs above and beyond cost of inflation. Can you explain why they're above the cost of inflation?
So the insurance has been a trend. There's only 3 main insurers in Canada that actually insure municipalities. So they kind of have a market share there. We can't look for insurance necessarily elsewhere. So we are working with our insurance providers to try and mitigate any costs where possible. We do also have, just as a municipality, the nature of claims are actually quite broad because we have a wide variety of services that we provide. We have a lot of vehicles that are on the road on a pretty much constant basis. So we're difficult to insure that way because of the number of claims that we do have. So that is why we're kind of at their mercy when they provide us insurance quotes. We do go to market periodically to try and make it as competitive as possible, but there are only certain major providers within Canada that we can rely on. As far as the audit fees, that was a request for a proposal that was put out. So that is the contract amount that we've agreed to based on the work that we provide. And each and every year we try to find ways to find efficiencies so that we can transfer data more quickly and make it more easy to do the audit. So as we've done that, we have found ways to mitigate those costs, but each and every year they do tend to go up higher than the normal inflationary costs that we see in other areas.
Thank you. The other thing, when you mentioned designated route, is that provincial monies coming in like designated highway?
Yes, it is. Through you, Mr. Chair, that is money that we're provided for maintaining those routes. So whether it's summer maintenance, winter maintenance, plowing, different things that we do on those roads.
So $13,000 would be probably a couple potholes. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is just the increase year over year. So the number is higher than that. That's just the increase that we're provided through inflation.
Thanks for detailing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now have Councillors Mallet followed by Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the insurance question, I know I brought it up a couple of years ago, and at the time, staff didn't see the worth in it. I'm just wondering now, and I didn't know there was only a handful of providers in our field. Just wondering, because I know some of the associations that were members offer that service to their membership, so it's a larger group on the insurance side. I wonder if we shouldn't, if staff shouldn't look into it. If it's a 1, 2, 5%, maybe we won't find any savings, but when we're in tough times and budgets are always tight, so any savings might help. So I'm just wondering if staff could work with our associations and try to maybe find some savings on that side.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have worked through we have a broker, but we haven't approached any of the associations, but that is definitely something that we can look at doing.
Excellent point. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chase.
Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Chair. Look, this is just a supplemental to my last point, and maybe I was a little too subtle, but I would like to hear from staff what the plan is for the implementation of the park plan for Odell and Killarney in particular.
In terms of the capital budget pieces that are involved in that, or the service budgets?
Well, if
and
it's
the
a
whole thing?
if it's a recap of the capital budget, that's fine. But yeah.
Yeah, Mike Walker, Dylan, I would think. Would have
I can
that.
jump in.
Yep, Dylan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, in the capital budget for 2021, we have planned some work in Carlton Park, some trail work in the Great Lawn, and that's tied to the Union Street contract. Also up in Odell Park, we have plans on the entranceway, some entrance signage, moving up the parking lot, start moving into the park. And that's tied to the roundabout at Wagner's and Rookwood. And then there's also some work in High Point and Leanne Parks. That's for 2021, and then continues on for years after that.
Thank you for that, Dylan. So yeah, look, I'll follow up in a memo. And yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions. Alicia, could you continue on, please?
Okay, so in our boriculture, the areas of focus there for 2021, basically a high level of focus there on tree watering to increase the survivability of the trees that we plant. Efficiencies in the tree planting process overall. So looking at using crews who are kind of off season to help with that planting process to get it done more quickly. The emerald ash borer management plan, scheduling students and staffing to demand in those areas to make sure that we're utilizing them in the best areas of need, and looking overall at an in-house tree nursery that we could grow climate resilient trees so they also have a better chance of surviving our harsh winters. Moving through to horticulture, again, looking at staffing to demand and an equipment review to increase our mowing productivity and capability there through our fields and different areas within the city. Moving on to leisure and recreation development and delivery. So the long anticipated all-wheeled sports plaza will have a grand opening in the spring. The recreation and parks master planning process initially was on our capital list as a potential deferral. We did hear from council that we wanted that done. So we have left that in the capital budget and that will begin in 2021. A pool study follow-up, as well as a field house feasibility and a cricket needs assessment study that will also go forward in 2021. Programming with COVID restrictions to make sure that we are providing some of that programming to ensure that we're helping reduce some of the social isolation that people are feeling due to COVID restrictions. Continued use of our online registration tool, Amelia, for more service provision. That's been a very robust implementation of software that we're able to use a software that we implemented for one thing to do a number of different things. Digital leap, improvements to social media, website, and again, our scheduling software. And then the new mass notification app, which will improve timely field and facility closure information to residents, and also has a number of impacts to other services that we provide within the city.
Thank you, Alicia. Councillor Millet, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not sure if it falls under the programming with COVID restriction, but I'll just throw my question in that line. Has there been any thought put into, if we stay in the same phases that we're now, for the splash pad for the 2021 season? I know we didn't open up this year. COVID was new, but I feel it'd be a shame if we don't find a way to make that work for the 2021. And obviously there might be a cost attached to it. So I'm just wondering if there are some plans put in place for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are dealing with a status quo budget as it is, but as things evolve and things change, that is definitely something that we will be reviewing going forward, is looking at all of our programming, summer, winter, spring, fall, to make sure that we are able to provide the most services available that we can. So that will be looked at. We will be bringing that forward through the spring to determine what we're able to provide.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dare, then Councillor Grandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The pool study follow-up, Fieldhouse, cricket. The line items for the Fieldhouse and cricket is 80,000 total. Is there a number with the pool study follow-up? Is there a budgetary number attached to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was a budget in the 2020 budget for $525,000, which would be kind of the next phases of what that pool looks like, or what an indoor pool could look like. So what we'll be asking of council is, because we didn't have the ability to do that work in 2020, is actually reserving that $525,000 and bringing that forward to 2021, which would give us the flexibility to do more study and more follow-up and figure out exactly what that looks like. So there's not a specific line in the 2020 or the 2021 budget, but we will be bringing forward the 2020 funding that we didn't spend.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Grandy. Nope, all set. Excellent. Alicia, please continue.
So moving through to recreation facility scheduling. So again, changes to the recreation card process for people living in the city, as well as in the local service districts that participate in the recreational services agreement through the Amelia software, and continuing to look on the ability to increase our dry floor usage in the shoulder seasons to make sure that we're maximizing the use of the facilities and that investment in the floor. Outdoor sport, recreation, and leisure spaces. Again, looking at the recreation and parks master planning process, expanded beach volleyball courts and the new bocce court at Wilmot. The ball field renewal and improvements that will be made at Royals Field. Continuing with the park plan implementation as discussed. Neighborhood parks development and renewal, and improvement of line paint quality for fields.
Councillor Millet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The dry floor used to maximize the use of those facilities, are we looking for, can I just get a bit more details on that? Is it throughout the week? Because I know it's on weekends, it's heavily used. I'm just wondering, I know throughout the weeks, it's not as much. I know there's a lot of partners that would probably want to get in there during the week. And I know the scheduling was an issue last few years. I'm just, if I could get a bit more details on what we mean by that.
I can start, but I might need someone departmentally to jump in. Building services has been working very closely with recreational services to maximize the programming in all of our facilities. So this is a part of our facility. It can be moved around to different areas, but where it is a part of our facility, the intention would be to make sure that we're using it to provide the most community benefit to different groups. So in the shoulder seasons, if you're putting it down for the weekend, you don't have ice scheduled, leaving it in and having the ability to use that for other groups is obviously something that would be very important. But I don't know if there's anybody online that would like to jump in with some more detail.
Yeah, I could, it's Dave Seabrook here. I think Councillor Maillet is exactly right. I think our first phase of implementation around the sport floor and the drive floor was really around sport tourism, which was weekend based, and we wanted to provide some opportunity to create some large scale events in our particularly at Grant Harvey. I think as we move forward, we now see that there's an opportunity to perhaps during the week and daytime allow some other groups in and to try to better use the time. So that might include recreational volleyball, it might include pickleball, it might include badminton or any other group, or just some free time for groups to or families to come in and use the space. So just making sure that beyond the sport tourism weekend business that we're making the best use of that investment.
Thank you. I like that answer, because I was thinking even some schools, I know George Street are very limited. So during their season, they're looking for places, but I didn't even think about just drop-ins, and I think that would serve the public quite well. So I think that's really good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Alicia, back to the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to community liaison social outreach. So the Fredericton Dialogue Community Initiative, Inclusion and Diversity Working Committee, and participation in the Housing First Development will be three key areas of focus there for that service provision. Moving on to cultural development, the new public art that will be installed at the All-Wheeled Sports Plaza, the development of public art operating procedures, refining those and creating them. Victoria Circle Public Art, the completion of that in 2021. And in line with kind of the overall grants process, reviewing the criteria for the arts and cultural grants within this service provision as well. So that is it for livable community. Moving on to mobility services. So the bucket of items there, dial-a-bus transit, fixed route transit services, parking management, roadway management, sidewalk management, taxi industry regulation, trails management, and transportation network management for a bucket of services there that costs $17.4 million. Within parking management, continuing on with our digital solutions for permitting and ticketing, equipment modernization, and supply management, including but not limited to commuter zones, and looking at ways to adjust our parking needs for longer term parkers. Under fixed route scheduled transit, looking at a charter policy, accessible service rollout, including policy development and implementation of that service, a marketing strategy for attracting and growing ridership, which is somewhat difficult during a global pandemic, new bus tracking tool, and monitoring the outcomes of the camera and Wi-Fi pilot that we have in place.
Councillor McDermott, you have a question?
Thanks through you, Mr. Chair. Parking management, digital solutions for permitting and ticketing, equipment modernization. Is there anything in there in regards to parking management in the downtown plat?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the supply management would be part of that, and reviewing the overall supply within that area. So the answer is yes. I don't know if Meredith's online, and perhaps she can provide a little more context.
Yeah, I would actually, because it's not so much about, I mean, we've been studying parking and that sort of stuff. We've been looking at supply. At some point, we actually have to start addressing some of the problems that residents, businesses, and institutions in the downtown plat face. So I'd actually like some clarification. We've been waiting for a long time, my entire time on council. I've said this many times. That's been one of the bigger issues in the community, and nothing has changed. So I just want to see if there's going to be progress in 2021.
I can speak to that issue. So I would answer the question in two ways to say, so the digital solutions for permitting and ticketing really has to do with our e-ticketing project that we're working with Hotspot on, to develop an e-ticketing system that wouldn't necessarily apply, I think, to your point, Councillor McDermott. Rather, I would indicate that the supply management and commuter zone piece is where the work that several councillors have indicated some interest in getting movement on the, we've called it commuter zone parking because that's really how it's captured within the parking plan. But that piece has to do with that residential and general on-street parking issue of, do we look at some sort of a permitting system for, be it residents, be it their visitors, be it commuters. So that piece is lumped in that supply management component.
Thanks, Meredith. So really, in a nutshell, yes.
Correct.
Thanks.
Councillor Jarrett, please.
Thank you. The fixed route analysis, that was one of the pieces that were suggested that we cut to find the revenue that we needed. It was $100,000. So that's still cut in here. But I'm wondering if we know exactly what it is that means to the transportation master plan, and if it is cut out, what it means for pushing things back, time frame, timelines, when we'll see things, other things that we wanted that coincide with parking that actually would help out with some of the parking issues that the plat, that Councillor McDermott was talking about, some of those issues. So I'm wondering if we could kind of have a little bit of a discussion on that and what it means for your shop, Meredith.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the on-demand study will allow us to do the deeper dive that really will need to be done in order to advance some of our objectives around improving service quality, customer convenience, frequency of service, without necessarily increasing cost overall would be the goal. So something like the on-demand piece, we believe, based on initial indications from what other communities are seeing, this is a newer model in transit, that it's creating a lot of efficiency. So in terms of timing, if it is put off, let's say until next year, in light of budget constraints and so on, then it will delay the ability to make some bigger move type decisions on implementing various aspects of the transit plan. So looking at the Northside Hub idea, the need for the future of the downtown hub, and whether all buses, for example, need to come into the center the way they do today, or whether there's a different model out there. That's what that study will help us start to hone in on. So if that plan doesn't move forward as a consulting project, staff will work with the capacity we have to start diving in and doing a bit of research. But our capacity is not as grand as it would be if we had some consulting support.
Okay, so by cutting this, we're delaying things a year to 18 months, maybe even possibly 2 years before we have to start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And these are things that we've each been dealing with for, well, I've only been here 4.5, but more than 10 years, right? So this is something that we asked for. This is something that we invested a lot of money into getting this transportation master plan put in place. And then it's something that we're kicking down the road a little bit further. And the east-west connections, specifically on the north side, has been a very hot topic versus the south side. The south side seems to work more in the north-south corridor for moving people around. So I don't see that cutting the 100,000 out of this is beneficial to residents. And I'm wondering how others feel and where we could find the money to put that back in play.
Perhaps on that point, Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this up, Councillor Dara. I wasn't too up on what this cut would do to that kind of plan. So I remember coming on to council a long time ago with Councillor Keenan, um, and being appointed, not at the first round, it was public safety first round, but it was transportation chair. And one of the big things I was pushing for, and we had just built Two Nations Crossing, was a way of putting bus service to the east-west corridor, people that needed to get out to the health, where the doctors were out on Canada Street in Marysville, and people in Marysville trying to get up to Brookside for various things, and shopping, and as well as other needs that they had. And Northside Hub has been discussed for a long time, and I'm quite disappointed actually that we would be implementing a cut for $100,000 and not finding it somewhere else, to not move this plan and get the plan laid out as we move forward. We just approved the PIC with the realm of, we have to get something in front of government in order for them to see it, in order to invest in it, without going through the planning stage and the consulting stage of this and looking at it. We're putting it off 2 to 3 years, as Councilor Dara said, and I don't think that's wise. Yeah, Councilor Chase has often talked about the buses in King's Place being out front and moving it to the back and asking the question, when can that happen, and why isn't it underway, and everything else. And I would think that we would want to at least start the discussion and the consultation on the Northside Hub to allow the traffic and the movement of people focused on that hub, while you look at what you're going to do on the south side, whether you actually need that hub at King's Place, whether you need all buses coming in. And I would think we want to move that forward. So, I guess I'm just, I know we're not here about the cuts. This is about the budget and everything, but Councilor Dara brought it up, so I just wanted to bring my 2 cents worth in, and to council as well, that I think we can have staff propose a different set of $100,000 cuts required to balance the budget than we did that. If that's not possible, then maybe this could be one of the top things, if we get funding from somewhere else, that we could bring back first inside of the, or for consideration of council, bring back first to put back on the line. So just my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me.
Thank you, councillors, for mentioning that. I'm sure staff will take those comments very seriously. Although we do still have the challenge of the system operating at around 40% capacity, which does impact both how its use is perceived by the community and how we could measure, what it's doing today. So I think a few things are going to have to normalize before we get the best out of a study in that regard. Although I certainly, for myself, see a tremendous value in moving on that file. Councillor Dara, one further point.
Thank you. The on-demand portion of that plan is an area that can help save a significant amount of money for the transit system. So that's part of that $100,000 study. It would be looking at the on-demand system for the lessening areas, which does help with the 40% capacity because of how the bus routes work. So just putting that in there as well. So I appreciate Councillor Grandy's comments about the extra money. I didn't think of that, but to let this 100,000 go, or to let this study go too far is it just wouldn't be prudent.
Excellent points. I have Councillor Chase, then Rogers.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, perhaps the marketing strategy will raise the necessary additional funds. Look, I agree completely with on the transit issue with what Councillor Grandy and Councillor Dare have raised. I think this is all very doable, if we roll up our sleeves and get at it. And I will lend my voice once again to, better managing the parking in the downtown Platte through a permitting system. And it keeps coming up and up and up. And so I thank Councillor McDermott for raising that yet again.
Thank you, Councillor. Could we hear from Dylan Gamble before we proceed on to our councillor questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. You hit the points on the reason why we decided to take that out of the budget for this year. Is one of the first things you do when you look at something like this is to gather data. And right now, our data would not be what our system used to be. We could look at historical data, but we also don't know if that's what the system's going to look like moving forward, and if people are going to, if things are going to get back to those numbers. So that was why we decided to remove that for this year, is just because of the uncertainty and the uncertain situation we're in right now.
Thank you, Dylan. I now have Councillors Rogers, then Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dylan, too, for that clarification. I agree with both the issues raised by Councillor McDermott and Councillor Dara, both on the parking and the transit study, because I think that I mean, the North Side Hub, as has been pointed out, has been talked about since I've been here, so that's 9 years, almost 8.5, and that the East, West, and the North Side's critical. I mean, I can't imagine the frustration, and clearly it affects usership. But what I heard in response to both of those questions, which I think is a greater issue that maybe needs to be addressed, is an HR capacity. And that is something that if things that we think are very important and long overdue are timely to do now, and the only reason we're not doing them is because of an HR capacity, I think that that's something that should also be explored. If it's for other reasons, fine, but if it's just simply that these are things that we've been wanting to do a long time, we feel it's imperative to do it now, but we can't because we don't have the resources to do it, I think that's a discussion worthy of having.
Excellent point, Councillor. Thank you very much. In fact, that's what we're here doing tonight.
It is, exactly. That's why I raised it, because nobody said, I mean, Meredith kind of alluded, but I think it's more our place, I think, to call out if we think there might be an HR capacity issue.
Mm-hmm. I didn't hear that, though, primarily being a mover behind this decision. But, I now have Councillor Price, followed by Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, in our budget here for mobility, we've got $4.537 million for fixed route scheduled transit. If we're spending $4.5 million a year on transit, which we definitely need, we want to make sure that it's serving us as best it can. So I hear Dylan, I agree, you need data to make it happen, but I also agree with my fellow councillors, let's not put it off for too much longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McDermott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, when we first started, I know I've spoken on this issue to a degree. When we first started our budget process, one of the things I talked about was HR, that I think there's an issue. And I brought it up, and no one, quite honestly, no one really seemed to want to talk about it. But I think that our capacity to do things in a increasingly complex environment is being hampered by our HR levels. You know, last year at the 11th hour, we got a funding request for adding staffing to Unite Fredericton. And I talked about at that time, a year ago, that we're looking at giving extra manpower to an external agency, but we're not looking at our own. The reality is, and one of the things that was touted and pointed out about this, and this is this is not a rehash of the 2020 budget process, but I want to create some context that I think was missing. One of the things that was really touted in supporting that was a 40% increase in development fees. Our building and our development in the city hit a record. And that's all very good. But the reality is our permitting and our development system is built actually on a user-funded model. So what we were saying was, we're happy to increase the revenue coming in by 40%, but we're not going to do what we need to do to ensure that the money that that's supposed to pay for is actually being handled in an appropriate fashion. I don't know if projects were delayed because of a shortage of inspectors. My understanding is there's one electrical inspector for the city who's dealing with Dr. Everett Chalmers Hospital and Mr. Smith's kitchenette in their residence. We have been fixated on this idea of keeping us lean. I understand that our whole lean program is not necessarily geared towards reducing our workforce, but actually just being more efficient in it. But I think we've gotten to a point that we have a capacity issue. We have a lot of things that we're not getting that are not getting done. Some of it is because of the capital cost. My concern is more about the human capital, the human resources that are missing. And a case in point that I point to is the fact that when builders come in, they pay a fee. That fee is supposed to support a service that the city provides. Yet as those fees grow, we're actually not creating any more capacity in that house to do it. So again, I brought this up 4 weeks ago when our budget process started. I'm not sure if anyone wants to have a conversation about it. I do. I think it's a real issue.
11 slides from now, there's a bullet point that addresses that, and maybe we'll pick it up there.
Perfect, man.
Okay. Please continue.
Moving on to roadway and sidewalk management, continuing to measure our salt use to ensure cost-effective applications and standard service level delivery. A move to GIS-based in-field captured information, partially due to this is just better way to work, but this is as a result of some of the COVID restrictions that we've had and had people working not in City Hall, but able to access the information in field. Monitoring plow time per storm to determine indicators and make sure that service levels are being met. Determine if equipment needs to be replaced before life cycle requirements. So this is listed under roadway management, but this is something that we are doing with our fleet holistically to look at the life cycle requirements and make sure that we're replacing the assets as they need to be replaced, that we're not replacing them too soon or too late. That's having implications on cost. We're going to increase the level of service provided in summer maintenance activities to address trip hazards. So making sure that the sidewalks are safe and the trip hazards are not as prominent. Within the transportation network management, continuation of Brookside Drive as a complete street through that reconstruction. The first phase of Brookwood Avenue Trail Connection and Odell Roundabout. A dedicated page to engage Fredericton to respond to transportation-related questions. Continued focus on active transportation, trail and sidewalk extensions, and crosswalk upgrades. Continuation of data-driven improvements to the transportation network based on information that we collect. And a continued partnership with the Fredericton Police Department to ensure that we're working hand in hand to address any traffic issues. So moving on to public safety, a bucket of services there, including animal registration and control, building construction permission and enforcement, bylaw enforcement, emergency preparedness, fire emergency incident mitigation, fire investigation, fire prevention and inspection, and police keeping the peace, enforce-led federal, provincial, and municipal bylaws, protecting life and property, and prevention and detection of crime. So within policing, the areas of focus there would be improving skills and competencies of the members in investigating major violent crimes. Training plan that's based on mandatory operational and developmental training. Strategic human resources plan, including recruitment, performance management, professional development, succession planning, and diversity. A full review and support of the special teams, including partnerships with other policing forces. Increased police presence in the city. Looking at a hub model for integrated community services and focusing on the importance of not only police-led methods there, but as well as the social side. And the recommendation and the request there would be to maintain the temporary funding that we had approved as council in 2019 and 2020. And the request there is that permanently be applied as 6 uniformed members and 4.5 civilian FTE positions to support the hub and overall support the frontline operations of the police personnel.
Your Worship, followed by Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to direct a question through you to the chief. Excuse my voice. A few years ago, when we added the additional members, and there was a definite need and cause for that, and we don't have to get into that tonight. But it was done really as an emergency because of some personnel issues, and we didn't really have KPIs or a lot of hard data to back it up. And tonight, we had a presentation from the chief recently on his proposed plans for this. But tonight, for the public here tonight, I'd like to ask through you to the chief. Chief, with these additional members now permanently in, and you've outlined it here kind of by bullets, but could you talk to me or talk to us, please, about how we're going to measure success with this investment? KPIs, deliverables, maybe get into a little more details what the actual plans are above and beyond the bullet. We don't need a 30-minute dissertation, but I think it's a big investment, and I think you know, we've got to hear it again. I think the public has to hear it. Please and thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try and answer that in a very succinct manner. First of all, obviously, I have to go back a year and a half to taking the position, looking at the organization for what we had from a resource base, how the organization was organized, and what visibility we had in our overall ability to work from a prevention side of the organization to actual policing, and then our ability to move forward with serious investigations, and also in the area where the area that's probably most complex we're dealing with right now is areas of mental health, youth at risk, diversity, homeless, all those issues that require some civilian expertise that work alongside our uniform members. So in doing so, what we did was streamline the organization into 3 distinct areas, one being patrol, which included the hub model, that would be focused especially in those areas I just outlined that required the more of a social piece as opposed to an enforcement piece. So that was the patrol side. The second side of the organization, the focus is on criminal investigation, major investigations, as well as on those areas that really affect everybody, and that's in the area of street crime and drug and organized crime. I think the results in the last quarter really speak for themselves with respect to what we've been able to do with the street crime unit, zeroing in on areas where break and enters are prevalent for drug users to be able to support their habits and otherwise. I think, as I mentioned to some of you last week, the actual street team just won the provincial crime prevention award for 2020 with respect to the efforts that they put in, even though they've been only up and running for about 9 months. In the area of drugs, meth, I think we don't have to go too far to know what's going on in the city with respect to the increased use of meth and other drugs, and what we're doing there, not only in the area of enforcement, but in the areas of education and prevention, and trying to tie addictions together with homelessness, how it affects mental health, and that overall big picture, which is where the organization is headed with the hub tied into patrols. The third side of the organization is one that Alicia mentioned on the support services side. Obviously in policing, once you have a major event, hopefully we won't, however highly unlikely, you have to make sure that every one of your officers are properly trained with respect to mandatory training. And that deals with your de-escalation models, your use of force, your firearms, your pepper spray, your support teams, which would be like your emergency response teams, your hostage negotiators, as was, that we would use, for instance, that happened as recent as Saturday, where you have an individual who is on a bridge attempting to commit suicide, and how you would work through all that. Those are your support teams. Also within the organization, when you talk about support services, generally speaking, and I know statistically, you can chew on each side of this one, but most policing organizations are zeroing in more and more on a higher percentage of a civilian component. And there's two reasons for that. A civilian component coming into the organization normally would bring with them a varied skill set that is needed. Areas like social workers that would deal with youth at risk, the mental health, some of the diversity issues and the like. And also their skill sets are different from policing. If you look at people that have backgrounds in whether it be finances, statistics, the policy side of the organization, the training, the development, the professionalization of policing, those need to be enhanced. And unfortunately, it's back to the mayor's point about statistics. If we look across most policing organizations, you're looking at anywhere from 25 to 35% of an organization that would have a civilian component. Within Fredericton Police, we're at approximately 16%. Now, that's not totally correct in saying that's all we have, because some of our support services are provided by the city. So a lot of help that we get with respect to HR and some of the finances, like Alicia in her world, would be included in that. But by and large, we're still below what I believe would be the average from policing. And we need to enhance our civilian side to be able to bring a different skill set into the organization, allow police officers to do what we are better trained to do, which is normally in the area of enforcement and some areas of prevention. The other side of the coin is we're working very closely with Wade's. Matter of fact, he's working with us full time right now to get exactly what the mayor's asking, and that is, facts and figures with respect to what is our civilian component doing, what is the value added. We've had a much greater police presence in the city, and I'm sure each and every one of you are aware of that. But when you have an increased police presence and you have an increased police enforcement side of the park, whether it be on traffic or other areas, obviously there's a higher need for the civilian side. Everything from court work, traffic expenses, having things go through the system requires a lot more civilians to be able to do that, to assist us in doing what we're doing. The other big piece is, as you all know, we do not have an org chart, a substantiated org chart in the organization that allows me to run an organization knowing that this is our exact number of FTEs, what salaries are associated with each and every position, so that Alicia can come to me, or I can go to her and say, at third quarter or halfway through the year, where are we on our salary envelope? Because our numbers are not permanent. You have a permanent plus a number of temporary FTEs. And unfortunately, without being overly blunt, it's been sort of rob Peter, pay Paul. Take money from one position, it's here, put it somewhere here. That's not a good way to track your human resources, not a good way to track your finances. And that's what we absolutely need to move forward within the next year. What we're asking for, and we're not asking for, a matter of fact, we're actually reducing the number of uniform police officers than what we have right now. Temporarily, we went from 103 to 113 with 10 temporary. What we're asking is to go up to 109 uniformed police officers across the organization, and then increase our civilian component by 4.5 which would allow us to stay within the money that was allocated for the last 2 years on a temporary manner. I did not see this year as a year that I could honestly ask for much. I couldn't ask for new money above this in the year that we're living through. And if we do what we have and what I propose, to put these positions in on the civilian side, put the members in on the uniform side, I will be able to form a baseline in the year going forward. There's a number of factors that we've already put into play. If we look at, our overtime budget right now, and when I say overtime, it's not overtime that we would spend on something such as a murder like the 2 we had in the city. Overtime, we do not use overtime anymore for scheduling. We have enough members on patrol that we can plan our patrols, we can plan our training, we can plan our annual leave, your time off, your training time, without paying anything on overtime. And that's a definite factor that we can zero in on to see if indeed we have the right allocation of resources in the right areas throughout the city. If we look at the focus of the street team, we look at the focus of our drugs and organized crime with respect to outlaw motorcycle groups that are in and operating around the city, we're making huge progress in those areas. But in order to do that, we absolutely need to keep the resources that we have in those particular areas. That would give us the baseline that's required. And, at next year's budget meeting, who knows? If the hub model works the way that we anticipate, that we start to get more of an involvement with some of the provincial and federal agencies in youth, addictions, mental health, and the like, we may very well be at the right numbers. And in some areas, we may be able to reduce if the focus is where it is. So, I guess to end it, I need to once and for all to be able to say to the organization and to the city, this is our financed number of positions. These are the uniform side, this is the civilian side, this is the support side. As Alicia mentioned, going forward, I'm working very closely with the chief in St. John and Larry Trombley within the RCMP. We're looking at a different policing model, not only for the city but for the province overall, to try and reduce all across the board. Do we need 3 emergency response teams, one in St. John, one in Fredericton, one at the RCMP, or could we amalgamate some of our resources and work together? If we look at the bomb disposal unit, the exact same questions would be asked. I've mentioned in the past how by us reducing or actually eliminating our underwater recovery team and our marine unit and outsourcing it last year, we spent probably $3,500, whereas if we had continued with the old way of doing business, I would be before council this year at the capital budget side asking for $200,000 to replenish or to actually refurbish, buy a new boat, buy a new truck, and increase with the training, which is no longer required. So there's, going forward, we just need to solidify what we have, come up with the base plan, and look at everything from statistics, finances. If you look at our sick leave, right now, our sick leave is trending down in a very positive manner. Our long-term disabilities is trending in the right direction. And unfortunately, from an HR perspective, this week we had 3 senior NCOs resign prior to 25 years. So that was sort of on plan from our perspective. And we just don't have a baseline to work from. So that's the goal from the Fredericton Police going forward. And I'm very confident that this year, if we are given the ask this year, that the Fredericton Police are going to be in a position to be very comfortable in providing the right level of service to the city and we'll have a really good baseline with respect to next year. And unfortunately, COVID aside, or another major incident or pandemic aside, that we should be adequately staffed, adequately funded to provide the service I think that we're expected to provide.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Mayor, would you like a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chief. It was close to 30 minutes. Just to summarize from my perspective, and I know our CAO is coming back in or sometime early in the new year with a report on some of the how the city will react to some of these social issues and the requests that have been going on, and of course the police will be front and center on that. And I really do want you to work hard with the I&I team to come forward, maybe on a quarterly basis as you develop the KPIs and develop your baseline, because that's important, because we're waiting for a couple of 2 or 3 years for that kind of information so that we can measure the success in this investment. So good luck to the force and as we work your way through this, but we will be looking really hard for some concrete numbers to be able to talk to you at budget time next year. Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I now have Councillor Rogers, followed by Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief, for the explanation. And look, I appreciate the challenges. I don't underestimate the challenges you're facing. And frankly, since I've been here, I think that there are challenges that have been faced. I know that the numbers, the HR numbers have always been a challenge. I think just about every year, the police chief of the day came forward asking for more officers, and we always kept the chief at bay until we had the crisis of 2018, and then of course we added the additional officers for very good reasons. So this is not a new challenge. I appreciate, though, that it's something that you're currently dealing with. I guess from my perspective, I look at the police budget or the public safety budget. It's 34% of our overall budget. It's $39 million. And we spend this money without actually having this overarching plan in place. To me, that should indicate where it is that we should be putting our focus. And we talk about KPIs. To me, we can't do the KPIs until we do the overarching plan that is both strategic and action potentially in nature, sets out priorities, sets out objectives, and then within that, it has an HR plan. And within that, it then has a training plan that indicates how do you train the staff. So I think, and then we put our KPIs in place to measure the success of those positions. So, and success of the various objectives within the plan. So I guess, I know we can't do that prior to making a budget decision tonight or tomorrow night or in a couple of weeks, but I'm just in general uncomfortable making such huge financial decisions when they're not grounded in a larger plan that's shared, with the civic authority. Because, we know that policing is changing, and, you've identified, Chief, all the various challenges, some of which are new and are increasing. And I think we certainly have an appreciation for that, but I'd like to have an appreciation for how we plan to address it overall, not just through FTEs. And even when we talk about the hub model, again, that is a model that requires partnerships with other levels of government. We know that we're challenged in that really in every front in our city. So that's obviously not a magic bullet either, and something that can be accomplished within a year. I think that even the rollout of the hub model is something that needs to be done within a larger overarching plan. So to me, that's what I'm looking for. I see in the focus areas for this year that there's going to be a training plan and a strategic HR plan. But to me, those are almost useless if they're not done within the larger guise, within the larger overarching plan, because they just won't fit. They'll just be on their own, isolated, and they still won't be showing how they I don't know how they work within what our ultimate goals are in policing. So I have a real need to rationalize some of these decisions beyond just knowing that it's what we need to do. And then even by just knowing that we're going to set a baseline and then measure in relation to what? You can't measure in relation to anything. We need to have the plan. We measure the success in relation to what the objectives are that are set out in the plan. So I would prefer, as opposed to little individual plans being conducted this year, I would prefer to see the Fredericton Police Force do a larger strategic action plan, and then within that address resourcing and resourcing partnerships, different initiatives. So that would be my ideal goal for the coming year.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I want to express my appreciation to Chief Brown, for taking on the management of the Fredericton Police Force. And, it's been 15, 16 months since he's been there. Inherited a force that really needed, to be reviewed and encouraged. And I think he's done a great job in pulling together, the force, so it provides top level service to the citizens of Fredericton. It's an extremely important area to people of the city, public safety. So I would say I agree with Councillor Rogers that, yeah, it is probably time, to put together, once you've dealt with some of the reorganization, is to put in place ways to measure, the improvement. I agree with that. But I think, what the chief has done to date is commendable. There is one area that I would add here, though, and, frankly, and it comes as no surprise to anyone coming from me, that the police could be further enhanced in their ability to provide public safety if they were able to take advantage of technology, particularly in the enforcement of, provincial legislation. I don't understand why the province of New Brunswick hasn't stepped up and taken advantage of technology. I mean, as they did with school buses, they're using technology to improve the safety of school children around school buses. So this is an area where there are, in fact, measurable savings and improvements in public safety to be gained. And I'm calling on the provincial government to, make those amendments to further augment Chief Brown's ability to provide good service to the people of Fredericton. Thank you.
Excellent point, Councillor. And perhaps under its newly branded committee name in the new year, we might have a review of the police program and those features, if you so choose to add that to your agenda.
Mr. Chair, 1 second. Can I just mention to what Councillor Rogers mentioned? I couldn't agree more with respect to need for an overall strategic plan. That's well underway, to be frank. The issue is, though, when I went in, there was another strategic plan that was well underway as well. It just wasn't going in the absolute direction that we are now headed. So if we had to wait for another year, we would not be able to provide the services that we're now providing. So to give you some, I guess, relief, I can assure you that the strategic plan for 2020-2021 is well underway, and I will have that before this council, in addition to the org chart that also has to be provided to the police commission. So, hopefully with the approval of this budget, that would be the stepping stone going forward for the org chart police commission. And I will guarantee this council, I will be before you with the plan that Councillor Rogers has asked for. And in fairness, she's very right in doing so, because that's what you need from me. And I can assure you I will provide it.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Rogers, would you like follow-up?
Yeah, I just had a question. Thanks, Chief. So when we're doing this strategic planning, I know we had the presentation from Sonny Ramon, I don't know, a few weeks back, and And there was the request that there be a public engagement aspect. I think part of that was my understanding. Is that something that you're thinking of incorporating as you do that strategic planning?
Actually, yes, and we've already started it. The CAO and I met with, the group from Black Lives Matter. We're also very focused right now on producing all the Fredericton Police policies on our webpage, online, open and accessible to the public. Having them and other public groups engaged in us actually developing some of the policies to ensure that it's at the right level going forward. So public engagement, yes, 100% going forward.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Chief, for your response. I'm seeing no further questions on this topic. Alicia, could you continue with our presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to building construction permission and enforcement. So to allude to Councillor McDermott's question before, the intention there is to meet service level targets for permit processing, working on digitizing the permit construction drawings to make it easier for staff to work in the field to help enable quicker processing of those permits as well. Improving the web page development and making that more prominent, as well as dedicating one of the inspectors to closing some of the older permit files to make sure that they're done in a timely fashion. Working through to 911 communications. So within that group there, some CAD upgrades ongoing that are enabling them to work much more efficiently. Updated and digitization of the operations manual. Working with the province on the next generation 911 common call taking project, and continuing with the PSAP peer support training to give better support to the staff that work in that area. Moving on to fire prevention and inspections. So adaptation of education and tours to online delivery. So previously, students in different groups could go in and tour the building. With COVID restrictions, they haven't been able to do that. So they are looking at other ways to engage the public in doing some of those tours. Alignment of metrics with initiatives that are ongoing in the fire department, as well as fire education programs that are tailored to meet the needs of the community overall. Within fire emergency incident mitigation, they're developing an on-shift trainer program where they're making one of the people that are on shift a primary trainer that they can then train the other people on the shift. So they're reducing overtime associated with training. Technology implementation for resource maintenance tracking and recording. Looking at some rapid intervention training and some fire risk assessment information with their long-term strategic plan that's consistent with the municipal master plan going forward. Fire investigations, so looking at the audit of the report format and content within that. Succession planning and implementation with their personnel, and assessment of reporting metrics for that particular area. Within fire training, looking at personnel development, succession planning, and performance management integration. Looking at electronic delivery methods for enhanced training capacity while leveraging some of the cloud-based content that they've been implementing. Strengthening the hazmat team functionality and developing, again, the on-shift trainers for the services specifically to ice water rescue and low and high angle rescues. Moving on to bylaw enforcement, focus on panhandling enforcement project that's been ongoing, as well as the property bylaw enforcement project. Through emergency preparedness, COVID-19 did test our EMO and business continuity plans, and we were successful in transitioning to working more remotely. Continuing with the vulnerable person registry, we have added the generator at our Parks and Trees depot. So that can now serve as a backup for City Hall services in case of emergency to make sure that all of the corporate services essentially that are offered out of this building could continue in case of this building not being available. Enhanced public communication regarding person and family preparedness associated with emergencies. And an NBEMO sponsored exercise will take place in 2021 that we'll be participating in.
Thank you, Alicia. Councillor Chase, you have a question.
Yep, thank you very much. Not so much a question as a statement. I am very happy to see the bylaw enforcement initiatives brought forward in this budget. I guess first to deal with panhandling enforcement. This is a perennial subject in the downtown. You know, as your representative to downtown Fredericton Inc., the panhandling issue, it's a perennial issue. It's there are new recruits all the time. It is a problem. But I'm particularly pleased to see the property bylaw enforcement project undertaken. I thank Brad Cameron for doing this. It's long overdue. When I started on council in 2008, one of the biggest issues in the people in the Hill area was protection of their right to enjoy their property, and you know, when it's, I guess, a gradual but steady deterioration in properties, and you know, when it really this could be mitigated by proper bylaw enforcement. So, you know, here we are 13 years later. I inherited this issue from my predecessor, and Tommy Jelinek. I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, some measurable improvements come forward as a result of this project. So I thank staff for bringing this initiative forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. Corporate services next.
So moving on to one of the final service areas would be our corporate services divisions and services within that. So communications management, continuous improvement, facilities management, financial management, fleet and equipment management, human resource management, information technology solution delivery and support, insurance coverage, legal services, occupational health and safety, public procurement management, public safety service request management, real estate management, records management, and request management. So within those areas, so management systems, the intention there would be to standardize work and improve business processes across the organization, implementation of and continued implementation of the bilingualism strategy, and building space optimization to make sure that we're utilizing our office space as best possible. Within communication management, so continued rollout of Engage Fredericton, the mass notification app for field closures, road closures, and emergencies. Again, the continued focus on bilingualism, and work to rationalize some of the professional services lines that we had and have reallocated that to a full-time new FTE within that area to promote communication. Moving on to legal services, looking at corporate contract management, looking at bylaw revisions to make updates less cumbersome for staff, and publish some legal FAQs for different users of the legal services. Within real estate management, intention there to revitalize the city's long-term strategic lands plan based on Imagine Fredericton, strategic plan for industrial parks and lands, and developing an overall marketing strategy for city-owned property. Moving on to human resource management, looking at records management and digital status forms, basically digitizing all of our information as it pertains to people. Looking at collective bargaining for outstanding contracts, and basically making sure that we're being consistent in those areas. Formalizing and standardizing the accommodation framework, and making sure that we're consistent with how we deal with some of our accommodations. Exploring blind recruitment and shortlisting practices, and continued implementation of the HR tactical plan, which includes diversity and inclusion as a main pillar there.
Can we have a question from Councillor McDermott first, please?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. When I did the counting, 11 slides down brought me to this slide. So I'm assuming this contained somewhere in here is the whole issue about staffing levels and that. And I would assume that it goes into as much the HR tactical plan, diversity and inclusion in terms of a bucket. So So I guess in the absence of me not being quite as involved in the budget making process as the chair has been involved, is there something on this slide that indicates that we're going to be addressing issues of staffing in a meaningful way so that we can build capacity to get these things done?
Yes, I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. That is one thing that we do every day. Going back to some of those human resource issues is each budget year we rationalize areas of need, and as departments come forward and request additional resources or additional FTEs, that's where that process comes through. So specifically on the parking and transit piece, there is actually a vacant FTE position that they're currently hiring for. That would be a strategist position that would enable staff to spend more time doing kind of that big picture stuff. As I mentioned with communications, the rationalization that there was an additional need there. So finding ways that we can add the permanent FTE to do that. That is something that we constantly do, and try to enable the resourcing to be put in place where necessary.
Okay, so I mean, look, that's great. You gave me two examples with a lot of this stuff. I don't want to get down into the weeds. I don't need an exhaustive list. But the question in my mind is as a corporation, do we have the staff in place? Are we in a position to say we have enough people to do the job, and not just the job that they're doing today, yesterday, and through 2020, but to meet the expectations of the community going forward when it comes to park plans, when it comes to parking plans, when it comes to a lot of that behind the scenes stuff. Are we in a position to say comfortably that we are in a good position for this? Or are there shortcomings, or do we actually just not even know? And I mean that not in a facetious sort of way, but the reality is we may not actually have data or information on that. So
I think, through you, Mr. Chair, there's probably going to be as many opinions as there are employees at the City of Fredericton. So as far as that goes, that is a very difficult question to answer with any amount of certainty. As I said, each year during the budget, people do come forward with asks for additional people that sometimes get approved and sometimes don't. But that is a bit of a subjective question that I'm personally not able to answer that question. I don't know if the deputy CAO over there who's looking down would have an answer, but I'll call him out because he's higher up the food chain than I am.
Fair enough, Alicia.
Sorry, Jeff.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question for me? It's just I was busy reading something else.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor McDermott was asking if we're able to answer as an organization if we have enough resources in the areas necessary to provide these services to the community, and how we address that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for having to ask for the repeat. So through you, Mr. Chair, I was following that line of questioning earlier, and I guess I think it's a very reasonable question in terms of providing the appropriate service to the public and whether our capacity allows us to deliver what's being expected. I will remind council, though, that in terms of this budget, we've had to make some pretty difficult decisions in order to balance it. We've had to defer a number of capital items simply to make things balance without looking at any kind of a tax increase. So we're certainly not contemplating an increase on staffing. The other thing I would point out through you, Mr. Chair, is that I think one of the examples that was used was development and whether we are able to provide the service that's expected during those peaks of development on the cycle. And we have to be mindful that, the cycle isn't always in its peak at its high level. So we have to have a sustainable level. We don't want to be adding staff for periods of time when it may return to a more normal level or it may not be quite as elevated as it has been. I think we want to be just very careful about that. It's not to say it isn't looked at or that We shouldn't be giving consideration to it if it's affordable, but certainly not a knee jerk. And I think sort of generally a lot of resistance to just going automatically to adding extra positions. Hopefully that covers it.
Okay, I mean, look, thanks, kind of, and I say thank you, but I still, I mean, really what's been offered to me is we can't add staff because council has made it clear that we're not going to increase taxes. That's one of our goals. And I think that's an admirable goal. But it doesn't mean that we can't look at things in the absence of that to identify if there are needs. I can appreciate the fact that development is cyclical. We have things set right now based around a certain cycle. The reality is you take that number over the past 5 years, and it has grown considerably. The cycle might be the same. Is the capacity there to handle that cycle? Has anyone looked at it? Look, I don't want to do this just for the sake of adding staff. This isn't what it's about. But the reality is I think that at some point we need to take a more serious look at it. Is it subjective? I think there are a lot of decisions we make are subjective and difficult to nail down. There's subjectivity around how we approach analyzing parking, transportation, the delivery of recreational community services and that sort of thing. This should not be an impediment when it comes to actually putting out and rolling out corporate services. The subjectivity should be something that we can work around and figure out and develop those KPIs and measurables that we can look at. So I'm going to let the horse just be for now, but I think it is something that is an issue. It's just going to become increasingly acute until there's a point that it breaks down a little bit.
Points well taken, Councillor, and we certainly through the Finance and Admin Committee can take a deeper dive, time permitting after budget, into exactly how that process works and how the HR management to productivity and demand, what that would look like moving forward. We certainly have new digital tools available to the city, and perhaps, a fresh look at these topics would move the city in a more efficient and better direction. Thanks. Getting us back on, sorry, City Clerk. Yes. Before we continue with our speakers list, we need a motion to continue the meeting. Moved by Councillor Darragh, second by Councillor Grandy. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk. The speakers list I have right now is Eric McGarity, Mike O'Brien, Kate Rogers, and then Dan Keenan.
Point of order on the extension. How long are we going in this meeting before we go to our closed session? We're going to establish a time, or we're just going to keep talking?
City Clerk?
Tonight. There is another evening schedule if need be.
So we set the meeting tonight just to give council some flexibility. So I would leave it up to the will of council. We've extended for 2 hours, but I guess as a group, you can make that decision.
Well, again, I just remind people we do have a closed session after this.
We do. We have, 2 more slides on the corporate and then the sustainable infrastructure piece. So maybe another 20 to 30 minutes on this, including the motions at the end, before we move into the next piece, or we could suspend this conversation and resume tomorrow evening.
Let's keep going.
I see a lot of eager councillors to keep going. Kevin Darragh, you have a comment?
Just keep going. Limited hour.
Okay, we'll check back in then. Let's get back to the speakers list then. Eric McGarity, Mike O'Brien, Kate Rogers, and then Dan Keenan.
Look, thank you very much. I just want to digress on the vulnerable people at risk through this COVID-19. I'm happy to see that they're resuming the vulnerable peoples and the risks that people are under. People that were at risk, at more risk because of COVID-19. So hopefully that we'll see some changes on that. Now with Staffing, it's time that we have diversity and inclusion here with internally in City Hall. It's many years overdue. The public are demanding it. So with diversity, if you don't have inclusion, there's no sense. It's just patronizing people. So I'm happy to see that inclusion factor back. So I'm going to be very willing to see what comes out of that and how that plan. So that's community demands that. So it's high time we get at it. In maybe in relation to Councilor McDermott, maybe we haven't looked at the thought of if we don't have, for example, a planner that has 100% time here, is that maybe we can, some of that time could be loaned out to other communities that don't have the resources to hire a planner, but they do need planning services, maybe some other bigger communities. It's called like a Range Rover. We have 50% here. Maybe there's another community that might use it 10 or 15% and are willing to pay for it. It'd be a lot easier for them to do that instead of going out and hiring that. So we haven't looked at options like that. And I think something maybe on the municipal forum that might come up, because now they're looking at communities and how they operate, and something we should really look at that might, we have 50% more time here for another half a planner, but we don't have enough for a full planner. So it's something that we should look at. Thank you.
Mayor O'Brien.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. When it comes down to staffing, good conversation, but I think we have to be careful. We have to patrol that ourselves. It's like scope creep. We're asked all the time to provide more services than we did before. We have master plans, and sometimes we ourselves want those all implemented within the first 2, 3, 4 years. They're 25-year plans. And we have to trust staff to bring those in as they can afford to do it, budget-wise and time-wise. Social issues. Social issues are the purview of the province. The community demands action, and sometimes we get put in a position where if we don't respond, we're the bad person. And we do want to respond in the appropriate level, and through municipal reform, who's responsible for what may change down the road. But as it stands right now, we put a lot of demands on ourselves, and we put a lot of demands on staff to do things faster and quicker and take on potentially more projects or responsibilities than are in our bailiwick. So we have to be careful too to not place those demands upon ourselves or staff, so that we can manage within a budget. There's obviously some strategies going to be brought in place where we can look at human resources and all that stuff, and very important. But for this year and the next year, we have to be careful not to overload and take on things that we're not supposed to take on. So thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Dan Keenan, you're up next.
I can be brief. Pretty much following up on what his worship said. Certainly, it's good to have the conversation about staff levels, so that so that our staff here, that we are concerned with the workload of our various departments. But I think we also have to remember that it's that's part of the role of staff, is to identify where the priorities are and to bring those priorities to us that they feel are most important. And we've given staff pretty clear directive on, the fact that we do feel that we didn't want to have a tax increase this year in light of everything that's happening and the impact it would have on business and residents. So, within that parameter, we've asked them to go back and create a budget for us, and they have. So I think we have to give staff the benefit of their expertise in what they've brought to us. This is the budget they brought, and we can talk about particular initiatives they've identified, but if there was something that the CAO or assistant CAO or senior management had identified that was critical, it would have been here. And so I think that I think to a degree we need to accept that. And the other thing is we've continued through our I&I process, and whenever we are identifying, you also often hear in those process reviews there's capacity that's been created. We don't actually pull those hours out, but they can be reallocated. So I suspect that that's part of what staff has been doing as well, is reallocating that resource to where it's most required. So I'm pretty comfortable with the process that they've provided here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions on the floor at this time. If we could continue on with the presentation, that'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not moving for me. There we go. So moving on to building services. So as is mentioned a couple times, the office space optimization and planning is ongoing. Control system upgrades at various city facilities, which helps with energy savings. Continued focus on energy and utility savings measures in other areas. Focus on asset management and operational efficiencies within the division, which ultimately spreads out to the service provision. Improving working relationships with recreation on programming improvements and adjustments that they can make there to find efficiencies and make things better for the end user. Fleet and equipment management, so equipment utilization and life cycle rationalization, as mentioned, to make sure that we're replacing the right assets at the right time. We have an after hours key drop-off box that now reflects that we have a 24/7 operation. So it makes it easier for some of those groups that work 24/7 to drop off their vehicles for maintenance. Looking at hybrid SUV replacements for our police vehicles, as well as a transit bus repair notification app that makes it quicker and easier to notify people when the buses are ready. And a refresh of the 6S to ensure that there's an organized workspace over at the fleet shop.
Sorry, Councillor Keenan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Back on building services, just a comment on office space optimization planning. I've mentioned it before, so I'll mention it again. I think as we look at space planning, that we should keep in mind that there are in the what we've determined to be the core, the urban core. We have it includes Main Street and Union Street, and I would still like to see us look at opportunities for some of those services to be on those streets to start to realize that urban design plan that we have there. And part of that would be for an investment by the city in terms of some of the services. Things like the city service center would be ideal. And I think, people wouldn't mind seeing that because they, frankly, it would be better access in some points along Main Street and Union Street, wherever that might be. So I would just say, keep that in mind. Thank you.
Excellent point, Councillor. Councillor Grandy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. On the fleet side, I just want to make sure that we had an explanation recently from director that we shouldn't go to electric buses because of unproven maintenance issues and others. I just want to note that we should be watching our neighbors in Quebec. A major announcement came out today on strategic initiatives up to 2030 about getting rid of all of their gas vehicles, going to full hybrid fleets or full non-combustible fleets shortly. So I think we need to keep that rationalization and watch that as ongoingly. And, a big province like Quebec is undertaking that. There's no reason we can't learn and start to come off on that as well. It seems to be, all of their service vehicles and all the government are all going to be electric and everything else. So I think we need to start to be more progressive in that realm. Thanks.
Excellent point, Councillor. And we may add to the work of our Governance and External Engagement Committee to petition the province to mirror the kind of provincial subsidies that have made those municipal programs possible in Quebec. I too would like to see those outcomes in my city. Councillor McDermott, please.
Just a quick clarification. That was GMB, wasn't it? Or was it federal? Oh, Quebec. Okay. Okay.
Up.
Alicia, please, do you continue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So moving on to financial services and Service Fredericton. So we're currently working on a project to refresh our revenue system that will enable paperless billing and better online tools, which is in line with our digital Fredericton strategy. So focusing more on the online options versus the inline options there. Tri-City purchasing continues to be something that we'd focus on and continue to work with the other larger municipalities to look at options to save money by purchasing more in bulk. For 2021, looking at a procurement software that will allow for electronic bidding and responses to RFPs.
Councillor Grady, question?
Yeah, on the procurement side, the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure recently announced, I believe, along with another minister, a new form of procurement strategies that are more local based. So I think it's important that we are in communication with the government as they change those policies, make sure we understand about more local content in purchasing. So I think they're going to review their actual policies and legislation to adjust for that. So I think it's important that we keep that. Our money should be spent here and not from as much as possible, and not necessarily through buying from other areas of the country if possible. Thanks.
Excellent. Heads up. Thank you.
Continuing on with financial management, so integrating the municipal plan growth strategy with the long-term financial plan and the asset management plan, and doing an overall refresh there of the long-term financial plan that was implemented 10 years ago. So it's timely that we take another deep dive into that. We are continuing with our cash management practices and continuing to see increased interest revenue on our cash balances, which enables us to reallocate that funding to provide services. Moving on to corporate information technology support and solution delivery, continuing to implement digital Fredericton solutions, improving the customer experience, using more cloud-based technology, and focusing on software as a service. And our latest news story, I guess, very important area to focus on would be our cybersecurity. So looking at some cybersecurity processes there, as well as looking at implementing some cybersecurity insurance for the city to protect us from any potential issues that we have or may have. Moving on to improvement and innovation. So overall, developing a new I&I strategy. Focus on innovation challenge type products. We've had some very successful challenges within the last few months that have garnered some very good results for our groups that have worked on those. We want to continue again to enhance our corporate metrics and KPIs, so we have an overall dashboard. Moving on to civic innovation. So continuing to develop partnerships with the community in tech innovation, collaboration, and commercialization, with a focus on Fred E-Labs. And as we've been discussing quite a bit lately, looking at the 5G partnership going forward. Moving on to sustainable infrastructure services. So the whole bucket there that really looks at our capital program and how we address that. So capital asset management, capital planning and implementation, capital prioritization and planning management, debt and affordability management, debt service costs, new and extension of our capital expenditures, and renewal and rebuilding of our capital expenditures. So an overall bucket there of $24.7 million. The focus there would be construction communication engagement with our key stakeholders, coordination of the construction projects to maximize asset life cycles and to minimize construction impacts on residents and businesses, engineering, management, implementation of projects across all city departments, and advancement of 4 key priorities, including downtown revitalization, park plan implementation, infrastructure deficit reduction, and active transportation implementation. Focus on I&I innovation projects through the implementation of managing projects in a virtual environment. So basically putting construction management in a digital platform. Energy efficient infrastructure upgrade projects to help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions and actually save money. And a rationalization of our infrastructure needs with the community demand. So making sure that we're putting in the right infrastructure in the right places. So overall, back to, I guess, Councillor Dara's question on the overall capital budget. The original 2021 capital budget that was presented a few weeks ago was presented at $22.7 million. As a result of the budget discussions, in order to balance the budget, the recommendation is that $3.127 million be reduced for 2021 and deferred or leased these following projects. I do want to note that we are still waiting on confirmation of additional funding sources. So if and when we do have any confirmation, we would obviously have the ability to add back some or all of these projects without negatively impacting any timelines as far as that goes. So it could be that if it was council's wish, that we could prioritize these and add them back in that priority level.
Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, I think it's obviously there's a question from our treasurer about there's the list and these are what we agreed upon to cut. But I think she's asking, well, you need to tell us what kind of priority, what are the priority of the items should the funding come available? Is that what you're asking through you?
It's not a question being put to us tonight, but it is a question that we will need to answer before staff.
She asked the question. I think she asked the question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it would be once we knew what the funding looked like that we would be coming back and asking council to prioritize in order to add those back. We're not certain of exactly what that funding level could look like.
Depending on the dollars.
Exactly.
Okay, good, thanks.
Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to come back to the slide on sustainable infrastructure areas of focus, which is, I'm going to say probably one of the preeminent slides in the deck tonight, because it highlights a number of key initiatives that the people of Fredericton have been calling for. I'm going to put on my downtown Fredericton hat for a minute and commend staff for the construction communication engagement and minimizing construction impacts, on the downtown in particular, particularly during a period of COVID-19 and recovery from COVID-19 next year. Staff have demonstrated great sensitivity in working with both downtown Fredericton and Business Fredericton North, to ensure that businesses are able to survive in this very difficult period. So that's important. But also on that page, the downtown revitalization and the park plan implementation, which I'll comment to our friend Dylan, probably could have pointed me to this and say, well, we're going to do that. Implement the park plans. Thank you, Dylan. And then active transportation, something that we've worked on very hard for a long, long time. A lot of people, were waiting on the, facilitating safe use of, streets and trails and the connectivity. Been talking about that for at least 12 years I've been here. And so, I thank staff again, and particularly John Lewis, for driving that. So that's probably the most important page in here. I'll take bets on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There may be a diversity of opinion over the pages that resonate the most with the councillors present. Nonetheless, this was the last slide before we go to questions. If we have no further questions, our next step here tonight is to approve the resolutions that follow. We're going to approve these by number. I believe I don't need to read them into the record tonight. That will be something that happens next Monday during the formal budget proceedings. Seeing no further questions then. Resolution number 1, moved by Councillor Peters, second by Councillor McGarity. Are we all on the same page? Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 2, moved by Councillor McGarity, second by Councillor Price. On the question? All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 3, yes, moved by Councillor Price, seconded by His Worship. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Resolution number 4, moved by His Worship, seconded by Councillor McDermott. On the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 5, moved by Councilor McDermott, seconded by Councilor Mallet. On the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 6, moved by Councilor Mallet, seconded by Councilor Rogers. On the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. And the final motion for this evening's meeting, resolution number 7, moved by Councilor Rogers, seconded by Councilor Chase. On the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you very much, Council and Mayor. And that brings us to the end of our proceedings for this Council and Committee budget meeting. See you